I want to talk about the two things because they're kind of linked in my mind by one big idea, which is yesterday we saw this guy at Google, this James Damore, got fired. And he got fired for sending out this perfectly reasonable memo that talked about the problems with a monoculture, the problems with having a culture that excludes conservative thought, that has people going to classes that are only available to one gender or one race. So in other words, if you think about it, it's so sexist to do that, because even though men and women are different, most men are taller. Men are taller than women in general, right? But there are women who are taller than men, right? I don't know what I am now because you shrink over time. I used to be about 5'11", so that makes me taller than the next 30 women. But if you're 6'2", you're taller than the next, I don't know how many it is, thousands of women actually. So, but of course, there are women who are taller than me, and there are women who are taller than men, and there are men who are short, and there are men who are more emotional, and all this, all this stuff. And so if you just say, well, only one gender is allowed to come here, only one gender has this concern, unless it is a immediately biological concern, you're excluding these people. So he's talking about this stuff, and he says, listen to this quote, which was in his report: "I value diversity and inclusion. I am not denying that sexism exists, and I don't endorse using stereotypes. When addressing the gap in representation in the population, we need to look at population-level differences and distributions. If we can't have an honest discussion about this, then we can never truly solve the problem, and you're fired." That was it right there. And here is how the media responded to that. Let me remind you of the quote, just the top sentence of this. "I value diversity and inclusion." Here are the media outlets blatantly lying about the Google memo. The Washington Post: "A Google engineer said women may be genetically unsuited for tech jobs." He never said that. He did not say it. He said that there are differences in what women like to do and some differences in what women can do, but they're general, obviously, and there's going to be individuals who go outside of that box. CNN: "Google CEO cuts vacation short to address controversial memo that argued women aren't biologically fit for tech jobs." And Time Magazine: "Google has fired the employee who wrote an anti-diversity tirade." The Atlantic calls it a screed and a Jeremiad. "The Googlers' complaints assume that all is well in the world of computing technology, such that any efforts to introduce different voices into the field only risk undermining its It's just nonsense. Forbes: "Google fires anti-diversity memo writer." Huffington Post: "Google fires male engineer behind anti-diversity memo." ABC News: "Google fires employee behind controversial anti-diversity memo." I mean, it's just lies. It is just lies. And what is so dangerous about this, so dangerous, is now Google it perverts people's minds, all right? So you have people now who feel that they have become the thought Nazis at Google, who think that they're being tolerant, right, by being thought Nazis. Here are some tweets that were put out by a tweet site called Political News Forever. Political News Forever. So here's a guy. I won't name him because I'm not going to dox this guy. He says, "There are certain alternative views, including different political views, which I do not want people to feel safe to share here." This is a Google employee, right? "My tolerance ends at my friend's terror." Here's a woman. She says, "I am considering creating a public inside Google document of people who make diversity difficult. Please share here any suggestions, criticisms, or words of warning." Another guy, he's a manager. He says, "One of the great things about Google's internal communication mechanisms is that as a manager, I can easily go find out if I really want to work with you." This is what these guys are turning into. Here's a woman who says, he's talking to a guy who says he read the original memo and it wasn't, that basically he's right, that ideas are being suppressed. And the woman replies, "Your reply ignores the many women Googlers who have expressed the frustration they feel as a result of this. F off. And thanks for using your real name, though. It makes it easy to update my spreadsheet of people with bad opinions." This goes on. These people are being turned into Nazis, and they can't see themselves because they're in this culture. And yesterday, we talked also to Bjorn Lomborg, who is just a guy who basically says, yes, global warming, yes, people are contributing to it. But the things that they do, he talked about the Paris Accord. Remember this hysteria that went on during when Trump dropped out of the Paris Accord. And he said, if everybody did everything that they promised to do in the Paris Accord, which has a possibility percentage of 0%, everybody, it would be like a fraction of 1% of nothing that would accomplish nothing and cost trillions, where if you put much, much, much less money into research, how to store energy, how to use different kinds of energy and fracking and all this stuff, it would achieve so much more. And I said to him, well, what's the difference? And he said, well, it's virtue signaling. I said, why don't they do the sensible thing? Why do they do the crazy thing? And he said, it's virtue signaling. This is the point I want to make about this.